Mike, firstly, how's everybody? Everyone fit?
Yep, everyone's good. So we had a good few days. So yeah, everyone's where we want them to be.
Timely West Brom to maybe talk about Dennis Sirkin and whether we're going to see him again this season. The signs are probably not. Would that be the case?
Yeah, we hope to. He's back training with the group, albeit not kind of fully training with the group. So we hope that's going to be the case. But I think, like the other lads that have come back, you don't want to rush them back too early. In particular, Dennis and Adji, because they've had such a long period out. But at the same time, you want them on the grass, and you want them around the group as much as possible. So I'm not trying to sit on the fence with the question. The plan is to try and see him. Whether that materialises, we'll find out in the next couple of weeks or so.
Is it perhaps, in a sense, because you're so close to the end of the season, is it worth the risk? If you've come this far with him, maybe it's best just to leave it. And get
there has been that conversation, but there also, I think, for Dennis and for Adji, knowing that they can play 60 to 90 minutes and going into the summer knowing that their body's in the right place, I think psychologically will be important for them individually. So there's obviously two trains of thoughts. Is it worth the risk? Obviously, if there was a huge risk factor, we obviously wouldn't take that risk. And you can see that a little bit at the moment with who's come back, Patrick and Adji. We've obviously gone a little bit slower than probably what you would normally, maybe earlier in the season. But at the same time, I do think it's important for a Dennis, I do think it's important for an Adji to be back playing, going into the summer, knowing that their body's in the right place, because I do think psychologically, if you don't, you got the off-season plus the pre-season, which is going to be, I don't know, what will that be, 10 weeks, 12 weeks? 12 weeks until your kind of real first competitive game. I think psychologically, maybe getting them on the pitch and getting them playing, I think will be important going into the summer.
And you mentioned Patrick there. Is it especially important when you talk about getting players back in towards the end of the season, ahead of next season, and more so for Patrick because he's sort of said that he struggled maybe mentally with being out and his form this season, and clearly, that game against Blackburn, he was nowhere near his best. Came on the other night, and we're starting to see a bit more of the Patrick Roberts of old.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, I would have a fully fit Patrick Roberts who would have a huge influence on the games like he has done previously. I think at the moment it's probably taken him, and there's no one more frustrated than myself in terms of trying to get him back up to speed. Thankfully, obviously Chris Riggs come in and he's performed really, really well. So it's not masked over the Patrick situation, but it has definitely helped someone in my position. So look, Pat is he's in a good place. He's kind of refocused. We've had a really kind of honest conversation after the Blackburn game in terms of where I think he's at. I think he's refocused. And it's similar in terms of him, I think it's important to get him on the pitch, going into the summer, but at the same time, if we feel there's a risk factor based on the fact he's had two, I won't say big injuries, but he has been out for two substantial periods of time. And again, it's a balance of that risk factor, but Pat's got to have a big summer. We've had that conversation. He's got to have a big summer. He's got to come back really fit, really strong. Patrick Roberts should be the first name on our team sheet. Patrick Roberts should be the kind of pillar for this football club to get back to the Premier League, because his ability is completely undoubted. But unfortunately for Pat, he would have been at a lot of football clubs where a lot of people have had that conversation. At some point, the penny's got to drop for him.
I'm going to come on to that because he said in the past what he's lacked is feeling that it's a club where he's wanted and he wants to play, and certainly being here. He's developed and feels at home, but he seems to be one of those players that is one that needs an arm around his shoulder and needs to be sort of full of self-confidence, and if that gets dented, that's when those issues tend to arise.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both with Pat, and I don't mind having this conversation because I've had it with Pat, and Pat knows my thoughts on him. I think Pat needs an arm round him, and he does need to feel loved, but Pat also needs boundaries and discipline, because those types of players, not just Patrick, they're kind of, I won't say free spirits, but those creative type players, They need direction and they need clarity and they need to know. What do you want from me? And I think I thought he had a really, really good season last season. I think that showed in terms of where we finished in the table. It hasn't happened for him this year, and I think he's got to have some reflection on why that is. And I think he has reflected on that. We've had a conversation. As I said, I brought it back to, I think if he has a really strong pre-season and he really focuses, I think he's got the ability to take this club where it needs to go. If he doesn't, then he might struggle. And I think the ball is firmly in Patrick's court. You know, the club have offered him a 3-year deal, so there is, from a club's perspective, they believe in him. And hopefully next year Pat will have a much better season.
I mean, it's not one to make this the Patrick Roberts show, but you mentioned last season, but a big part of that was having Ahmad to play with, play alongside. Yeah,
definitely. But if you take an Ahmad, regardless of a Pat, if you take an Ahmad out of any team in the Championship, you know, I don't think you can replace an Ahmad. And the club did really well to recruit him because his loan prior to that Rangers didn't go particularly well. And obviously he came here and showed Sunderland and the whole of the kind of EFL and probably the Premier League just how much ability that he has got. I feel sorry for him because I think he probably should have played more football than he has played this year based on what he achieved last season. But, you know, that's none of my business in terms of why that hasn't happened. So I don't think Patrick's performances this year have been because Ahmad's not here. I think Pat has to own some responsibility for himself as well. I think players sometimes they will go, well, I haven't had this and I haven't had that. When, you know, I've had a conversation with you, you've got to look internally first, and if you can say I've done everything properly, then you can start looking externally around those factors. So I wouldn't say Patrick's performances last season have been Patrick's performances this season haven't been detrimental because of Ahmad. It will be a factor, of course it will, but I also think Pat has to take some responsibility for himself first before that is a kind of conversation point.
Into the here and now, everyone was very impressed with Mbele the other night, but of course to accommodate him it was playing in a 5. I'm not sure how much you're going to give away about tactics at the Hawthorns, but would you be tempted to see him again tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely. You're always tempted. I think the whole starting 11 would have an argument to start again, because I think in particular out of possession they executed exactly what I asked of them. I felt in possession there were key moments within the game where we didn't quite execute a pass or we didn't quite execute a decision. Which I think was a deciding factor in why we got a draw and why we didn't win. But I think all of them, not just Timmy, but all of them would have an argument around probably playing again. I think the difficulty the group have with me is obviously I will do my research on the opposition, and as I've always done, I've always tried to pick a team that I feel is the most capable team to win the game. So We'll see for tomorrow. I think West Brom are a completely different type of opposition. I think the coach, as I've said previously when we played him, I think he's one of the best in the league. I'm a big fan of his, and I think he's absolutely maximised what he has at West Brom. I think West Brom have got a good squad, don't get me wrong, but I think he's done a really, really good job. So it'll be a really tough game, but it'll be completely different to West Brom. To Leeds.
I mean, you've done your research. 2 players in the West Brom squad, maybe heroes and villains from Sunderland's perspective. Jan Via, who was absolutely adored when he was here, only a short spell, and Josh Madger, who perhaps is seen as a bit of a villain and not necessarily his own fault that he left when he left, but very much looks like one of, if not both of them, would be involved.
I think they'll both be involved. I'll be surprised, and listen, I'm not trying to play games. I'll be very surprised if they both start, if I'm honest. I think Josh been out since obviously he played us last time and unfortunately got an injury, and I wish him well. Not on Saturday, but I do wish he kind of gets back on the grass as soon as possible. And Jan Via, I mean, I think it was his first start the other night, so I'd be very surprised if he goes kind of back to back in a week. So my personal opinion, my gut is that they won't probably feature from the start. They might feature at some point. Like always, I sit here and say the Championship's one of the toughest leagues in the world. And teams have to utilise their squads, and I'm sure Carlos will be doing that. If you looked at the subs that he made, if you looked at the players that came on, the timing of those subs, there would be a suggestion he's going to make some changes, I would have thought, but I would be surprised if both of them start.
And a betting man will probably suggest this has got draw written all over it. Your recent record and West Brom's recent record.
Well, we're not going there to draw the game. I can guarantee everyone of that. Look, I think one of the things that I had privately in my head was to make us harder to play against, and it took me a little bit of time to get to that point. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of that. I think what we have to show on Saturday is a little bit more quality in the final third. And I say quality in terms of decision making more than kind of technical execution. I think when to release a pass or when to play with a teammate, I think is something that I'm expecting the group to show a significant improvement in. But yeah, West Brom are, as I said, I think they're a really, really well coached team. I think Carlos has got the absolute maximum out of what he's got. I think he's got a good squad. I think he's got a talented squad. So it's going to be a really, really tough game. It'll be a very tactical game, and hopefully it will be the right side of the performance. We're definitely not going there to draw. We're going there to get maximum points. Cheers, Nick.
Just to kind of touch on that, I'm sorry my voice is
Sorry.
gone a bit. There's only 4 clean sheets now in 5 games. How do you use that defensive solidity to help you kind of going forward as well?
Yeah, it is difficult because obviously one of those games we conceded 5 and were terrible, so it's really difficult to really kind of jump on the positivity of that because of that one performance. But I do think we've looked really solid in a lot of those games. As I said, I thought the Bristol game we were more than deserved winners. I felt the other night, I think where I'm frustrated is we should be sat here with 2 wins, if I'm being completely honest. I thought if we were better with the ball in key moments against Leeds, I think we would have won the game, and I say that respectfully to Leeds because I didn't feel like they were ever going to score. I couldn't feel them ever breaking us down, so I felt there was a couple of really key moments where if we made a better decision we would have scored, and if we would have scored I think we would have won the game. And I think against Bristol we were more than deserved winners. The goalie got man of the match, so we should be sat here with 2 wins really. I think that's probably where my little bit of frustration is, if I'm being completely honest. But I've said all along, I know the results haven't been great. The group are in a really good place. They're trying to execute what I'm asking of them. There's been pockets of positivity. There hasn't been enough consistency. But I think the group's in a really, really good place. And I've said, after the draw against QPR, and then obviously we went to Cardiff and won, that I felt that it would go in a different direction. And with margins away from that being the case in the last 2 games in particular, obviously the Blackburn game is a kind of one that everyone wants to forget, but I think sometimes when those happens it just kind of re-sparks everyone a little bit in terms of we need to make sure our standards stay really, really high. So to answer your question, I think there is some positivity, but I've never been one to sit here and try and spin a positive narrative. I've always tried to be authentic and genuine. The reality is 4 clean sheets in 5 games, but we've drawn 3 of them, which we want to turn those draws into wins.
Yeah, and looking forward to the last sort of 4 games, you obviously gave Pimbelli his first start against Leeds. Is there a temptation to kind of utilise the squad a bit more with kind of relegation and playoffs sort of on the cards?
A little bit of a temptation, but I think as the coach, if you start kind of experimenting, I keep using that phrase, experimenting, I think it gives the players a little bit of an excuse to say, well, are we going to win this game, or what are we trying to do here? The focus from the group and the focus from me is to win every game of football, and that has been no different from when I took the team a few months ago to now. Fortunately now I have a much deeper squad to choose from. I have a lot more competition for places. I have a little bit more quality to rely on. So there's more of an expectation from my perspective to get more results. So yeah, I understand the narrative around that. I do understand the narrative around that. I think that is something that we need to have one eye on, but also we want to win games of football.
And Kerry, just finally for me to sort of touch on the sort of support that you have had through travelling fans, and how much does that mean to the players? How much the fans just continually stick with the club?
I can't speak highly enough of them. Like I've fallen in love with the area in terms of from a personal perspective. I think it's an amazing place to live. The fans are really passionate, but they should be passionate. You know what I mean? Like we can't take the emotion out of the sport because that's what makes the sport great. And they're only passionate when things aren't going well. So it's really clear for me. We'll just make things go better. And when things are, in a much better place, they'll be passionate, but for positive reasons instead of negative reasons. But I can't sit in my position. The players can't sit in their privileged positions and go, it's great here when things are going well. Well, if you want to take that side of the fence, you got to accept what comes on the other side. And the reality is, well, let's not be on the other side of the fence, if that makes sense. Let's not give them a reason to be passionate, but for a negative reason. And listen, I've sat in this position, and the results haven't gone as well as I'd like them to have gone. But I'm still hugely complimentary. I'm still hugely passionate about this football club, about the fans, and we work every day to try and get one step closer to where we want to be. Obviously, it's not going to happen this summer. But what I'm not going to do is, for the next 3 or 4 games, not have that focus in mind. So for the next few weeks, every day is an opportunity for us to be better for next season, to get back to where we belong.